Well, it's delightful to be here with you. And why don't we just ask the Lord to bless us, and then we'll get into our presentation tonight. Father in heaven, Lord, we're thankful for this revival weekend. We, every minute of every day, need to experience revival physically. We need to breathe. Our heart needs to beat. We need to wake up. So bless us tonight. Wake us up and give us some things to consider that might not only help us learn, but maybe grow in our faith. In Christ's name, amen. So, Celtic revival. This is an interesting title, and depending on who you're talking to, that can mean different things. As I've noticed by talking to a number of people here in Ireland since I got here, and before I came. But just a way of history, in 410 AD, Rome pulled back its troops from Great Britain. And over there in England and Scotland, you have two walls. One is called Hadrian's Wall, that was built in AD 122. And then the Antonine Wall was in AD 142. And they maintained that northern one for a while, then they pulled back to the southern one. Last year, I walked that wall, or some of it, with my wife as part of our anniversary. We came over and walked that wall. Very impressive structure, but what they tried to do was keep the Picts and the Scots at bay because they were seen as barbarians. Anybody here named Barbara? I don't know if that's where your name comes from, but I'm thinking it might. So, and this left England defenseless against the Scottish Picts and Irish pirates. And the Picts were called Picts because they, well, I'll show you that in a minute. During this time, a 16-year-old, along with thousands of others, were captured and enslaved in Ireland by a Druid chieftain. Is anybody here 15 years old? Raise your hands if you're 15. All right, James. Is the other James 15 as well? What are you? 14. All right. We'll grandfather you in. So 14 or 15 years old, they were taken away. They were trafficked, is what they would say today in America. They were taken away. And Ireland was still filled with Druid priests, pagan altars, and human sacrifice at that time. The Irish sacrificed prisoners to their war gods and children, newborns, to their harvest gods at that time. And the Romans, in their first encounters with these exposed, insane warriors, were shocked and frightened. The reason they call them exposed is because they didn't wear anything when they went into battle, and so this would be shocking enough to be attacked, but by people that were just that looked rather fearful. And they were howling, and it seemed possessed by demons. These are the reports of the Romans who interacted with the Druids and with that group of people that were called Celts as well. A wicker man in the form of execution is what Caesar wrote the Druids used for human sacrifice. So they make these big wicker statues, and they would fill them with actually humans, and then they would burn the whole thing down. Now you might think these things are like from way back, but the names are still utilized today in many video games and many different things. I don't know if anybody knows about this particular warrior, but Irish heroes became possessed when confronted by the enemy, and their appearances can alter considerably, and they called this phenomena the warp spasm. So the Celts back then, they would go into what was called a warp spasm. So let me just assure you that this weekend is not about this type of revival. We're not trying to go into warp spasms, and we're not necessarily tapping into the this particular side of Celtic revival, although there are many that are. They also did something else called shape-shifting, and in virtually all the Irish tales, we have come upon the Celtic phenomena of what was called shape-shifting. Shape-shifting was the ability of a being to turn itself into something else. And the Irish believed that gods, druids, poets, and others who were in touch with the magical world could be literal shapeshifters. They could reshape themselves, they could transition into something else, and they may be able to do that to you as well. This was the belief. So a hawk today might be a boar yesterday, and they called it wonderful instability. They didn't know whether they'd be a bird, a boar, or whatever. So when we were at Kinlarney yesterday at the national park, we saw some deer running by, we saw some cows running, and they would think maybe that's my relative or somebody that's the cow or the hawk or whatever. And they were also known for painting their bodies, so they believed in shape-shifting, they believed in all these things, and they painted their bodies. There's a renaissance of this now, a lot of body paint. The Latin word for picti first occurred as a eulogizing speech in 297, and is most commonly explained as meaning painted. And this is generally understood to be a reference to the practice of tattooing, which was very big in the Celtic culture. Claudian, the Roman one writing in 404, that's just before the wall shut down and before Patrick was taken captive as a 16-year-old from Scotland, right near Glasgow, to Northern Ireland, speaks of designs on the bodies of dying Picts, presumably referring to tattoos or body paint. Now, there is within this worldview a terrifying personal implication, and that is nobody really had any fixed idea. Look at the person next to you. They could become a hawk. They could become a lion. They become a bear tomorrow or a boar. So, like the rest of reality, they were essentially fluid, essentially inessential, because you could change. You're not essential if you could just literally be changed and become something else. This terrifying instability haunts virtually every sentence of ancient Irish literature, and allied to their experience of reality's fluidity is their understanding that the world is full of hidden traps and, as it were, a forest filled with concealed pitfalls. So how many of you like to wake up every day and not really know what you're going to be? And would you like to wake up and maybe be shifted to something else? So it was a very destabilizing situation. There's not a hero in the ancient Irish literature who does not fall prey also to some taboo, or gesa, a word that means observance, something that they had to do or else they'll be in deep trouble. In the Irish stories, the traps seem to lie hidden at every crossroads, and trickster gods lurk behind every tree. In such a world where no one can hope to avoid disaster for long. So they were totally tense. They were totally not at peace. They were not singing Blessed Assurance. They weren't singing Great is Thy Faithfulness, because everything could change in a moment. And everything was very unpredictable. And it is in this setting that we have entering the 16-year-old known to us today in Ireland as Patrick. Now, a lot of people, I don't know, I've talked to a number of folks that are indigenous from Ireland living here their whole life this week, just because I want to talk to them and see what they would tell me about Patrick. And but Patrick, in the 4th century, Irish Druid pirates destroyed a village of Celtic Christians. What kind of Celts were these? Celtic Christians. So these were not your indigenous, long-standing Druid background folks in Ireland. These now had converted to where? Christianity. Where did they convert? Well, actually, the Celts that came to Ireland had come originally, some of them from Gaul, but some of them had gone to what's called Cappadocia in Turkey. How many of you have ever been to Turkey or Cappadocia? And in Cappadocia, these were all from Gaul or Galatians. We have a book in the Bible called Galatians. And the book Galatians was written by Paul to a bunch of Celts who ultimately, some of them actually came to Ireland. So if you want to read a book in the Bible that was written specifically to the Celts, and you want to have a Celtic revival, read the book of Galatians. And the book of Galatians talks about, I don't want to get into that because that would take me another hour. So these Druid pirates took captive a 16-year-old named Patrick. He became a slave tending sheep for a Druid chieftain for 6 years. So this was in Northern Ireland, and they know where this is, and the actual mountain where he worked. They've identified these places if you wanted to look at some of your own history, and maybe you already have. How many of you know everything I've already said so far? And you're just going, we know this, we hear this on the radio. Anybody ever hear any of this before? Okay, anybody at all? Anybody alive? Let's just raise the hands for a minute. Are you actually alive? Okay, yeah. So, okay, good. We have a nurse here in case someone is going on out. She's a new graduate. She can do CPR on you. So, he became a slave tending sheep, and he was a near atheist when he was captured. He didn't believe in God. He had not accepted Christianity even though he was a Celt. How many of you know any Irish people who have not accepted Christianity? So this would be like him. He had not accepted Christianity. And he cried out to God, however, because he now was in a rough situation. And he cried out to God in despair, praying over 100 times a day. He had what you might call is a revival. How many think we need a revival? So this Celt had a revival. And a revival came from him praying multiple times every day. It was like he was in touch with God directly. He was isolated, didn't have a cell phone. Isolation, didn't have any friends around him. Totally disconnected. Now, I work as a part of a program that they come and they pay us $10,000 for 10 days. And one of the things they pay us to do is take their cell phone away. They didn't know that before they came, but we want them to get disconnected from the internet so they can get reconnected with reality. And amazing things happen. Did you know that just after 4 days of disconnecting from your cell phone totally, that your ability to use your frontal lobe and creativity goes up 50% in 4 days? So if you ran over your cell phone on the way here or dropped it in the sink or whatever, count your blessings. 4 days later, you're going to actually be smarter than you were. You're going to be able to have a lot more abilities. But anyway, so he cried out. He got connected, reconnected with God 100 times a day. As he grew close to Christ, he became increasingly repulsed by the witchcraft and human sacrifices of the Druid priest. And by the way, maybe I'll talk more about this sacrifice tomorrow, but one of the big things is they had to sacrifice for all kinds of different things. And Christianity took away that pressure because it said there's already been a sacrifice. There's already been a once-for-all sacrifice. It was a very freeing thing to become a Christian if you were involved in sacrifice. So why did this happen? Well, this is what Patrick said. Because we walked at a distance from God and did not observe His commandments. How many think that's a pretty interesting statement? We walked at a what? A distance from God, and we did not observe His commandments. Now, one of the presentations this week, and I'm going to go through the commandments and show you how they actually help you diagnose depression, and they also help you know how to experience recovery. And I'm going to go through those 10 commandments one by one, and I think you'll find that very useful to you. He desired to share the good news that he had come to learn. And they called it back then the gospel, which literally means God's spell. So instead of being under the various spells of the chiefs and the druids, you could be under God's spell, the gospel. And this was something he wanted to share. He that laid down his life for you is he that speaks in you. And so when he heard this dream, he had a dream, he awoke with joy. So how many of you have ever seen these high crosses? They're all over the place, and this is one from Iona. And these high crosses, when you start to look and understand the artwork, the Christian Celtic crosses are different than the Druid Celtic crosses, but the high crosses actually tell a story. On this particular cross, at the very top, although you can't see it, well, maybe I can, I don't know if I can. I can't blow it up, but right up there where the arrow is, oh, you can't see the arrow, on the very top, it had lions that were representing Christ's majesty. He's called in the Bible a lion from the tribe of Judah. And then it shows right in the middle Mary holding her baby, but they're surrounded by angels. So it's the lion from the tribe of Judah will protect you. How many think that would be something that people would find comforting in a Druid culture? Very comforting, because they didn't know what animal was going to attack them next. And then Christ protected by angels. And then there's actually on the cross the story of Daniel, who's protected in the lion's den. And then next you had David, who was protected from Goliath. And then you have here on this Celtic cross, you actually have David playing his harp, which I think is the national instrument for Ireland. Is that right? So this cross actually was a very powerful picture of lions protecting you, angels surrounding you, and then being protected even in the midst of lions. This is Celtic Christianity. How many understand what I'm saying? This is Celtic Christianity. And then you had Abraham preparing to sacrifice Isaac, but then right when he's ready to sacrifice Isaac, what does he hear from heaven? What does the voice say? Go ahead and sacrifice him and a whole bunch of other people. Is that what it says? What's it say? You don't need to sacrifice. I mean, that's a very powerful message in the Druid culture. You don't need to sacrifice. And God has got that covered, very powerful. And then David playing his harp. He's protected from Goliath, and then he's playing his harp. And then the very bottom here is a picture of a whole bunch of snakes. And of course, the legend, which is not verified at all, except maybe metaphorically, was that Patrick and Christianity, when he came back from Scotland to Ireland, he was, first of all, a slave, and he left, and then he came back, and he shared the gospel. And by the way, he wanted to do away with slavery. You know what he used to do away with slavery? The Bible. Everything on this was done from the Bible. And he used the Bible to do away with slavery. He used the Bible to do away with mistreatment of women. He used the Bible in all of these, and this was all summarized. Now, this cross is only 100 miles off the coast of Ireland in a place called Iona, where there was another person from Ireland who left and founded a school on Iona. His name was Columba. And this is from Iona. This is actually the cross that in replica form is right in front of the Abbey today, but they have the actual cross. And so all of these pictures were telling a story of what? Celtic revival, Celtic Christianity. So, now, it's interesting, in America at least, I see a lot of people with all kinds of Celtic artwork on their bodies. They're Picts. They're Scottish Picts, you know, they have the pictures all over them. And I'm always asking what those mean. Because I figure if they spent enough money to put those on their body, then maybe they want me to ask about it. Now, that could be dangerous if most of the tattoo is covered up and you don't really want to look at that section of the body. So you got to be careful about how you introduce these things. You don't, you know, I've learned this the hard way, but the ones I can see, I'll say, tell me what that means. What does that mean? Now, I want to point out one thing tonight because I don't want to keep you too long tonight. You're tired. How many of you are tired? But I want to take one thing. They would use the harp here. He would use the harp to protect and, but make just one other observation here before I go on. Wait, is this the thing I'm looking at? When you look at this, what do you get the sense? It's like Christ has protection above, beneath, on the side, everywhere. He's protected everywhere, and he can protect everywhere. Which reminds me of a story that people will tell you about Patrick when he came back as a missionary and he went to see one of the top chieftains, I think by the name of Tara, T-A-R-A. And when he went there, he was a little afraid, and so he came up with this song. I remember this song. How many of you have ever heard this song? Christ be with me and within me. Christ behind me and before. Christ beside me and to win me. Christ to comfort and restore. Christ beneath me and above me. Christ in quiet and in danger. Christ in hearts of all that love me. Christ in mouth of friend and stranger. Look at, suddenly now, with Christ in his life, Patrick is saying he has nothing to fear. I'm not afraid of the stranger. It's not an evil spirit. I'm not afraid of the bears and the hawks and everything else because Christ is within me, above me, beneath me, behind me. Christ in every heart that's broken. Christ in every joy and pain. Christ in every word that's spoken. Christ in sun, moon, and rain. Christ in resting. Christ in rising. Christ the Lord in all my life. Christ to guide me and to shield me. Christ protecting me in strife. How many think that's kind of a beautiful picture that's given? Total protection, total peace, total comfort. And of course, all said, this is a part of a much longer song or poem that started with being protected by the 3-in-1. Okay? Being protected by the 3-in-1, which was, he utilized the clover to teach that. Irish had survived invasions by with competing warlords, Vikings, and Picts rushing with swords on the attack. But Patrick, armed only with the scriptures and his love for the Irish, amazed him with bravery above all others. He wasn't afraid of the king. He wasn't afraid of the threats, because when the king came to capture him because he had started a fire at a time when he said no one could start a fire except himself, he went right from starting the fire right into the king's presence, and this totally caught him off guard. He said, "Where did you become so fearless? You're more fearless than anyone else." He spoke of his king's kingdom, telling them of the infinite love of his king for all of them, and his yearning desire to have them know him. The wild ones must have felt themselves tamed and the haughty ones humbled. Patrick's was a message of hope given with deep felt compassion. The Irish would have said, here is a story that answers our deepest needs and answers them in a way so good that we never ever dared dream of it. We can put away our knives, abandon our altars, and these are no longer required. Why? Because God does not hate us, He loves us. So in other words, the core message of Celtic Christianity is what? Love. Love. Not violence, not hate, but love. Now, how many think we need a revival of love in the world today? Anybody here believe that we need a revival of true love? That's the picture. Now, I work with many different people that come to our program from around the world. And then sometimes I'm traveling different places. I was in Hawaii a couple weeks ago, and our waiter, was this not up on the screen? Okay. Oh, I need to do this. Our waiter was dressed like this. Now, what are all these? I don't know, but with that much hardware on and everything wearing there, I mean, you couldn't get through a metal detector with this on. I thought, this guy must want me to talk about it, you know. So I said, excuse me, could you explain what all these things you're wearing mean? I said, it looks like you've invested some resources in those. Right, dear? Isn't that what I said to him? And what did he say? A lot. I said, well, tell me about this. Tell me about that. Tell me about, these were lions' heads. These were all these Celtic symbols. And I said, you know, I just was asked to do a Celtic revival in Ireland. And so I need your help. How would I bring a revival? Do you think I should buy some stuff like this and maybe wear it? He goes, I think so. So well, maybe, I said, so we had a conversation and I talked about the different pieces. And then I said, well, let me show you something that I was studying. And I showed him that cross. The cross I just showed you that had lions on it, that had angels and had these different things.